Hi, I'm Firewalker, here today to discuss Mehanna versus U.S., freedom of speech or terrorism. The Bill of Rights outlines the fundamental freedoms of U.S. citizens, and among them is the freedom of speech, which is called into question in the upcoming Supreme Court case Mehanna versus U.S. The freedom to criticize our government has been fundamental since the beginning of our nation. Benjamin Franklin writes in 1722, prior to the birth of the U.S., "Without freedom of thought there can be no such thing as wisdom, and no such thing as public liberty without freedom of speech." Yet the boundaries of free speech have always been called under question during times of war, and the so-called war on terrorism is no exception. The question here becomes, when does speech go from being free to 17.5 years for a terrorism charge? This case is important because it holds the content of one person's political speech as grounds for a prison term. Before we launch into the facts of this case, I just want to ask you guys to please bear with me as I'm making an effort to condense approximately 100 pages of research into a reasonable length video. Mehanna made a short trip to Yemen in 2004. The prosecution alleges that the purpose of this trip was to receive training from a terrorist organization. However, Mehanna claims that the trip was solely for religious and/or scholarly studies. It's important to note that at that time there were no known terrorist training camps in Yemen. In 2008, Mehanna was arrested for giving a false statement regarding the whereabouts of an acquaintance of his to police during an informal interview in the break room at his work. A year later, he declined to be an FBI informant and was brought up on terrorism charges. In 2011, he was found guilty of providing material aid to terrorists and conspiring to provide material aid to terrorists in direct violation of 18 U.S.C. 2339 A and B. The First Circuit Court of Appeals affirmed his conviction in full in 2012. There are three main arguments for his guilt. The first of which, and the one we're going to focus on, is his translation from Arabic into English of 39 ways to service and participate in Jihad, and then uploading it to the internet. Second involves anonymous alleged co-conspirators who submitted statements, quote, indicating that Mehanna sought to wage war against U.S. forces in Iraq, among other allegations of planned illegal activity. And last, of course, is his trip to Yemen in 2004, supposedly to receive training from terrorist organizations. The questions that need to be answered relative to freedom of speech are, first, what is material support? Second, did his prosecutors prove material support? And ultimately, were Mehanna's actions protected by the First Amendment? In order to answer these questions, we must first look at the 2010 precedent, Holder v. Humanitarian Law Project. In the court opinion of this precedent, we find, and I quote, "The term material support means any property, tangible or intangible, or service, including currency or monetary instruments or financial securities, financial services, lodging, training, expert advice or assistance, safe houses, fake documentation or identification, communication equipment, facilities, weapons, lethal substances, explosives, personnel, and transportation, except medicine or religious materials." Before you make your own decision, it's also important to note that in the court opinion for the precedent, it also says that material support statute, which is applied to speech, should be interpreted to require proof that a defendant intended to further a foreign terrorist organization's illegal activities. Also, independently advocating for a cause is different from the prohibited act of providing a service. It does not penalize mere association with a terrorist organization, and the statute is carefully drawn to cover only a narrow category of speech under the direction of or in coordination with foreign groups that the speaker knows to be a terrorist organization. And in all my reading, I did not see once any citation of any proof that Mehanna was in any way, shape, or form in contact with Al-Qaeda directly. And we also learned that material support is a valuable resource by definition. So what do you think? Did Tarek Mehanna give material support to terrorists? This is Firewalker asking, how would you vote? And what do you think the Supreme Court of the U.S. is going to decide? And why? As always, you can see my sources in the description. You can also like, comment, rate, share all down below. You can also vote on my Facebook page what your opinions are on this case, and I look forward to seeing you guys again.